to the DxO webinar. One does hope. Please say something quickly in the chat room, because usually when I hit the go button, I hear a you are live now. I didn't hear that this time. So it could just be, oh, my audio output was set to a non-existent source, so I think we're good. Let's just double check that. So in the chat room, please say hello. Please say that you can hear me. Yep, see me, hear me, loud and clear. Everybody says, excellent. All right, well, let's get this thing going. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I am Photo Joseph. I am your host today for a DxO webinar on how to make your snow pictures, your snowy landscapes look mo better. We are going to specifically be using Color Efex Pro. I know where I am. Color Efex Pro today. We're actually going to dip into one other tool just a little bit here today, but we are going to be using almost exclusively Color Efex Pro. Very quickly, a little bit of housekeeping before we do get started in here. In the event that this is your first webinar, I'm going to tell you how these things work. First of all, I will be doing live Q&A throughout the entire thing. You should be able to see my screen right now as well as see me. If I can think and type at the same time, I can remember that I'm trying to go to the nickcollection.dxo.com/webinar page, where in theory, you can see the other upcoming webinars. However, the folks in Paris have just returned from holiday and haven't quite updated this page yet, which is currently, as of the time of this recording, only showing you up till last week's show. But the fact this page isn't loading tells me maybe they're doing it right now. But nickcollection.dxo.com/webinars is where you should be able to go to sign up for more of these. There are, I believe, 3 or 4 more coming up in this series, and then actually we're just continuing on through September. Both Dan and I are going to be doing a bunch more of these. It looks like about 2 a week, so there's a bunch more of these coming up, and they're all unique, which is really, really cool. Once again, the questions will be answered as we go. So anytime you think of a question, something you want to ask, just drop it into the chat room and I will address it as we go as much as I can. If I happen to miss your question or I don't know the answer to it and I can't answer it, feel free to hit me up on social media afterwards. I'm at Photo Joseph everywhere, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, of course, and Twitter is probably the best way if you have a question directly related to one of these webinars. Just hit it there, hit at Photo Joseph in there, and I'll do my best to answer it. And with that said, I think we're ready to go. We are going to start with this picture here. Now, I am today working out of Adobe Camera Raw and then therefore out of Photoshop. If you haven't seen one of these with me before, I will reiterate why I think this is, for me at least, the most preferable way to go. I obviously already have Photoshop. I'm paying for Photoshop, so I can use it. If you aren't, however, you do not have to have Photoshop because Photolab does come with the Nik collection as well, which is a fantastic raw processor. And in some ways it is better. It does give you some things that Photoshop does not. But one of the main advantages of working in Photoshop is that you can create a smart object, which we're going to walk through, which means your filters are smart filters. And this is, to me, a critical part of the workflow, and you'll see why as we go through this. It doesn't mean that it has to be done that way, and you certainly can work with other tools. This is just my preferred way of working with the Nik collection, so that's what we're going to be doing today. Every photo that I open is almost every photo is a raw photo. There's one that will not be. And you can see here that it is started just at its default settings here in Camera Raw. We haven't done anything to it. Usually what I do first is I hit the auto button just to see what's there. This helps me to gauge an idea of what the software thinks that how the picture might be processed. We can see here that with this particular photo, it has brightened up the green trees quite a bit more than I really want. I kind of wanted those to be silhouetted, and it actually blew out the snow in the background there. So I'm just going to undo that because that really didn't work in there. But one of the other things that I will do, other than hit the auto button, is especially in a photo like this, and let's just say for the sake of argument that I really wanted to pull texture out of the green trees in the foreground there, I will take the exposure slider and just drag it way up and way down just to see what's actually there. And by doing this, I can see that there is in fact a ton of detail in the green foliage in the foreground, if that's something that I decided I wanted in the photo. And as I go back down the other direction, I can see that there is a ton of detail in the snowy peak in the background here. So there is a lot to work with in here. Now, it's not the sharpest photo in the world. A little bit of a hazy day when I shot this. I know it looks clear, but a little bit of haze between me and those mountains. But suffice it to say, there is a ton of detail in there if I want it, and a ton of color texture, color detail, and texture, I guess is the word I was looking for, exposure detail in there as well. So with that said, I think this photo, there's not a whole lot to do with it quite yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and open this one. Now, if I click on open right here, this is just going to open it as a rendered out TIFF file in Photoshop, and then I'm going to lose the smart object capability of this. So what I will always do is hold down the shift button, which makes this button turn into open object, click on that, and that takes me into Photoshop with the full scene. So this is more what I want, because now as a smart object, I can not only edit a filter as a smart filter, but I can at any time go back into the raw editor and make a change to the raw decode on there. So that's where we're going to start in here. All right, let's go ahead and add a filter to this. To the filter menu, knit collection, Color Efex Pro 4, and depending on when you launch the filter, it will give you a dialog that says, like the first time you do this, it'll give you a dialog that says, hey, we've detected this is a smart object. This will now operate as a smart filter. It gives you a little bit more information. You can dismiss that dialog, which I apparently have already for this plugin. I think we're going to see it on another plugin come up, but in general, it's just a little, not even a warning, just an informational dialog telling you that that is the case. All right, if you are new to Color Efex Pro 4, let me give you a very quick tour through here. The way that Color Efex Pro, or CEP as it's called for short, the way that CEP works is you have a series of filters over here on the left under the filter library. Right now I'm in the All tab, which means I see all of the filters, but they're also categorized into different common use cases. So if you're retouching wedding photos, you probably will find everything you need under wedding. If you're doing nature, you'll probably find everything you need under nature. This is not a hard, fast rule. Obviously, you can use any filter on any photo, but they've been organized in here in kind of nice, tidy little ways for you. Underneath the filter library, scrolling down to the bottom, is this thing called recipes. Recipes is another word for presets. And the presets to me in every single one of these plugins is a really important aspect of it, because it allows me to not only see what the tool can do, see what it's capable of, but it helps me to learn the tool. If I've never used it before, if I'm new to it, or even if I'm not new to it, honestly, going through the presets is a fun way to get ideas of what it can do and to realize what it can do. And then that last part, the ideas, that's probably for me personally the biggest reason to use presets. Just because there's presets there and I click on them doesn't mean I'm going to stick with it, but it gives me inspiration. It gives me ideas of what I can do with these filters. So as you can see here, there are a bunch of different filters that have very dramatically different looks to them, and I can click on any one of these, flip through these, and see, if I can find something that I like. Maybe I find something I like as it is, or maybe I just find inspiration for something else. Over here on the right-hand side, we have the actual filters that have been added. So you'll notice here, for this whatever preset I clicked on last, vintage saturation, I guess, it says up here there's film grain, Glamour Glow, and lens vignetting. Okay, let's click on another one. So I go to something else, I click on that, and it's, well, Glamour Glow again, and film effects faded, and image borders. And I click on something else in here, and it's bleach bypass, and Glamour Glow, because Glamour Glow is popular, and vignette lens. And these are different filters that are being used for these presets over on the left. Now, here's the thing about how this all works. You can, of course, completely forget the presets. You can start from scratch and get rid of these little, filters by clicking on the little X button right here. So let's just get rid of all of them. And now I have the original photo, no filtering applied to it. You'll notice here that it says empty filter. I can, of course, click on a preset, or to have more control, I go to the filter library and I click on whatever one I want. So color stylizer, great. So I clicked on that, it loaded color stylizer. Now here's the really important thing to notice about CEP. If I now go to click on another one, let's say I click on high key, it does not add it. It has replaced the one that was previously there. So now high key is in place. Let's add another one here. I go on, I say remove color cast, and remove color cast is now the only filter. To add additional filters, you have to click on the add filter button, which adds an empty filter, or a filter holder, if you will, and then I can go in here and add another one. So now I've got remove color cast and film effects faded. Add another filter, and I can go in here and click on paper toner. And now I have 3 different filters stacked on top of each other. These filters can also be rearranged, which is really important because that can dramatically change the look of the image, dramatically change the effect of it. Some rearrangements don't have any visible difference, but some of them are dramatically different. And probably the simplest example of that is, imagine, if you will, that I added a color cast filter, a color tinting filter, and I tinted the whole image red. And then after that, I added a black and white filter. Well, a black and white filter is going to render whatever came before it black and white. So I'm going to have now black and white. Whereas if I rearrange that and the black and white filter is first, the image becomes black and white. And then I add the red layer on top of it. So now I've got a red filter over a red tint over a black and white image. So super important to be aware of the layer stack, of the order of them, and to consider them when you're adjusting your images. And you'll see in today's presentation, there will be a couple times where I will rearrange the filter order because it makes sense for what I am trying to achieve. So with that, let's move on with actually playing with these things, shall we? So I'm going to, again, start with the presets, just because, again, I kind of like them. It's kind of a fun way to go through them and just start kind of clicking on a few of these and see if there's anything in here that I really like. And I know that there's one in here somewhere that's kind of interesting. So let's just go ahead and scroll down to that one. It is called Even on a Cloudy Day. And I've probably now scrolled past it because I'm way down to the bottom. Let's see here. I think it was actually under the new On Vogue presets. By the way, these, anytime you see these On Vogue, those are new presets with version 2, Knit Collection 2. Here's the one that I wanted, Even on a Cloudy Day. And the reason that I selected this one to start with is, for whatever reason, and I don't know why yet, and we're going to find that out. For whatever reason, the filter, the pile of color effects, has rendered this kind of purplish tint up here in the corner of the sky. And it caught my attention. I thought, ooh, that's kind of nice, actually. I kind of like that little purple. If I hit the compare button here, I can compare back to the original. So if we look at the original, we really don't see it. Although now that we've seen it, it's like, okay, if I look, I go, okay, so I can see a little bit of color up there. All right, cool. And if I take off the compare button, then of course it goes back to what we've done to it. Incidentally, when you're comparing, you also have a split view here. So you can do a side-by-side, or rather a split view, I should say, where you can rotate that split so you can do it horizontal or vertical, or you can do a complete side-by-side on here if that works out for you. I usually end up going in the single view, but obviously it just depends on what you're doing and what you want to do. So let's start with this. Let's start with this preset. And one of the things that I like about this preset is, as I said, that kind of purpley color in there. Now it has blown out the snow up here a little bit, so that's something I'll have to be careful of. So let's zoom into that and pan over, and we can see that we've maybe not quite blown it out, but it's definitely a bit brighter than it was. And it has also added this purple cast to the snow, which I'm not a huge fan of. I mean, a little bit of it would be okay, right? But I really want the purple up here. I really don't want it too much down there. And the light that's hitting the mountain right here is called Alpine Glow. It's just that perfect moment where the sun is just about to go below the horizon, and you're just getting that really warm light just scraping across the edge of the mountains. It's called Alpine Glow, and that's what we've got here, even though we're nowhere near the Alps. And it's beautiful. So the lighting is really good. I want to enhance what's there. The sky is pretty flat, but as we've just seen through one of these filters, there is some color hiding in there that we can probably extract. So that's going to be the objective. So the way that I'll figure out what is going on in here is by simply going through the filter stack that the preset has added and turning them on and off one at a time to figure out what is doing what. Now, before I jump into that, let me take a quick look over the questions and making sure that everything is loud and clear and all good. Yes, excellent. Again, if you have questions at any time, drop them in there, and you should be we should be able to get to them. I see Sergio saying that you see a frozen face for me. You should be seeing everything moving. No one else is seeing a frozen face, so perhaps consider refreshing. Someone's asking about a recording. Yes, I neglected to mention that in the beginning. 24 hours after today's webinar ends, you will get an email with a recording of this video in it. So you will be able to rewatch any part of it that you want to or that you may have missed. Okay, so we are right now trying to figure out what's going on in this image and how things got the way they got. And what I like about it is the warmth and the purple in the sky. So let's see what's going on here. So I'll just turn them off on and off one at a time. So I turn off sunlight. Okay, well, sunlight filter has definitely added some of that warmth. We can really see that quite clearly on the trees on there. So that's good. That's a filter that I like. All right, good to know. Levels and curves is doing almost nothing. Very, very little. If we open it up, we can see what's going on, and all right, we can see that there's like the tiniest little bit of the red channel. Green was nothing. Blue's got tiniest little tweaks. They're really, really minor. So for now, I'm just going to turn it off because I don't want to be kind of confused by what it is or isn't doing. So it's barely doing anything, so I'm just going to turn it off. Let's see, cross-processing. Well, it's doing quite a bit in there. So cross-processing is doing something in there. And I do like what it's doing. We can tell that at least some of the purple is coming from that. Well, actually, that mouse growing there just reminded me. I want to make this mouse a little bit bigger so it's easier for you guys to see. There we go. Okay, so we can see that cross-processing is adding a little bit of that color cast to it. All right, good. And then there's this one called Old Photo, and that is also adding a bit of the color cast. Okay, so now we know that the old photo and the cross-processing together are giving that purple. Let's just turn off the sunlight to kind of verify that. And again, toggle these on and off. And yeah, it's kind of a combination of the two that are giving us that. So, all right, so that's what we're going to work with. Let's start with the cross-processing. We look in here and see what's gone into it. So I'll actually turn the sunlight back on there too. So we can see in here cross-processing, what it actually is simulating what happens if you cross-process film, which is the effect of taking negative film and processing it in positive chemicals, those are the chemicals for slides, or taking positive film slides and processing it in negative chemicals. That's what cross-processing is. And you see here the formulas, it's C41 to E6 or E6 to C41. Those are the chemical formulas. And there's a bunch of different presets in here, and you can go through and play with them. But of course, I like what I've got in here, so I'm not going to change this. But I just changed it. But we're back. Okay. But there is also a strength slider in here. Now, the strength slider is a really important slider to be aware of because it is in, I'm not going to say every single filter because then somebody will prove me wrong, but it is probably in all of them, if not all of them. And the idea is that it takes that entire filter on a global level and dials it down, which on a filter like this, it seems like, okay, well, this is just one slider strength, whoop-de-doo. But if you're looking at some of the filters that might have a series of sliders and you want to take the entire effect and pull it back a little bit, scale it back a bit, instead of having to go to each slider and move it down and down and down and down and down, you have this general global strength slider for that entire filter that you can control. And it actually is quite handy. It's one of those where you can really go very easily and just scale back an effect just a little bit in there. In this case, I want to try scaling it up and see what happens. So as I scale this up, the image gets a bit brighter overall, and we are seeing a little bit more of that purple showing up in there. Okay, so that's cool. Now it's affecting the mountain way too much right now, but for the moment at least, I want to just focus on the sky. Let's go to the old photo and see what happens in here. There's not a whole lot to change in here. There's different styles, and I don't really want to go finding another style that may or may not work. There's a brightness slider. It's just brightening up the whole image, so now it actually was kind of good where it was. There's a grain slider. It's adding a little bit of grain in there. Let's actually probably get rid of that. I don't really need to add any grain into this. So it's not doing much, but for whatever reason, the combination of old photo and this little bit of cross-processing is giving me what I want. So I really like what's happening in the sky up here. I think I wanted a little bit more, but yeah, let's see if we can get a little bit more. I'm gonna go into levels and curves again. Let's turn that back on. I'm actually gonna reset it. Let's just start this guy over again, reset the filter. And I know that whenever I'm trying to enhance or decrease colors or contrast in an area, curves is a really good way to go. Right, I can go in here and I can do a simple S curve, pull the shadows down darker and the highlights up brighter, and that's going to give me a more contrasty image. Okay, that's cool. It's totally not working for this photo, but good to know. Actually does kind of look okay in the sky there. But more powerfully than that, potentially, is the ability to adjust the individual red, green, and blue channels. And I know that if I go into the red channel, I can change just the red channel. That'll change the entire look of it. So for example, what I might want to do is pull up the highlights on the red channel, make them a little bit brighter, and we can see how much more red we've added to the entire scene in here. Now that's too much, but watch this. If you're not familiar with curves, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lock down my center point. You can see that because it's kind of like a rubber band, because I've adjusted the highlights here, it's kind of forcing the shadows down, but I can force that back into place and keep this first part of it much more linear, and then just take the top part and pull that up a little bit. And now I'm getting a little bit of red just into the brighter parts of it, just up here, which is kind of good. Let me try going into the blue channel, and let's see if I can do anything good in here. If I pull a little bit of blue out, is that gonna work? No, I don't really like that. No, don't like that, so let's just reset that. And a big part of this is experimentation. What works for what you're trying to do? What is going to give you the look that you want? Or maybe you don't know what you want, you're just playing, and that's perfectly fine too. And at that point, I'm gonna say, you know what? I really like that sky in there. I really like it a lot. Let me go back to the full, just to the Luma curves in here, pull the highlights up a little bit, add a little bit more contrast into that sky. And again, I'm looking at the sky. I know it's affecting the whole image, but you'll see why in a moment. And I'm gonna say, yeah, I kind of like that the way it is there. I think that's what we're gonna go with. Okay, so now I've got the sky looking good, looking cool, but of course it has affected the entire image. Well, for those of you that have seen any of the Nik plugins before, you're familiar with the control points. And the control points allow me to control very easily where an effect is going to be applied to and is not. Just in case you're not familiar with control points, the idea behind a control point is much like a mask. It, once again, controls where the image, where the effect is applied and where it is not. But unlike a mask, it is not just a general thing that applies over a generic area, like a radial area or a lineal gradient area. It is not something that you apply with a brush. A control point is a mask that is generated in real time based off of the chrominance and the luminance. That's the color and the level value, the brightness values of the pixels over where you dropped the control point. So what that means in practical sense is if I drop a control point on the sky, it is going to affect only stuff that looks like the sky. Now, there is potential for it to bleed into other things. For example, the chrominance and luminance of parts of the snow are kind of similar to the sky, so those might get picked up as well, but we can build onto that control point mask very, very easily. And let's start by adding a control point and just dropping it into the sky right there. And right away, we saw something change. It may not have been exactly what we wanted. We may not be totally sure what we got, but we changed something. Now, the way to see your mask, to see exactly what has been applied, is to go over here to the control points and turn on the mask. And now I can see where it's been applied. And I go, okay, all right, so I've got this here up in the sky up there, and let's kind of make that a little bit bigger. So it's definitely affecting the sky, great. It's also affecting the snow down here. That is why if I hide the mask, I'm still getting that purple cast here. So let's do this. Let's go back to that view. I'm going to add a negative control point. This is now to protect an area, and I'm going to say, don't add that effect to anything that looks like this. And I can, in fact, option drag this control point to make another one and reposition it to wherever I think it needs to be to further kind of refine that mask. So it's not a perfect, simple edge mask along the mountain, which, as I'm sure you've seen if you've tried to draw a mask like that, it never looks clean. What this is doing instead is building that mask based off of, again, the values of where I've clicked on, and the fact that it bleeds over a little bit is actually really good. That is part of what makes this believable and sells the effect. So now I'll turn off the mask view. We go back into this, and we can see that that is being applied, and it looks primarily in the sky and just a little bit down here on the mountains. Now, if we want to preview this, of course, with and without, I can just toggle that on and off up here. So get rid of the levels and curves, and I go, okay, well, it's getting there, but you know, this effect needs to be a little bit more in the sky, and I think I'm going to need to do the same masking effect onto one of the other filters, cross-processing, maybe old photo as well. So let's see if we can make the mask a little bit more precise to begin with. First of all, it's affecting the sky, but it's not affecting it over here. All right, well, let's just kind of option drag one of these over, and let's make this a little bit bigger. So now I've got more of the sky being selected. Maybe I'll try a different positioning. Let's go something like that, something like so. Let's take another couple negative control points. I don't want to affect the shrubbery down there. Let's get down there, and you know, looking pretty good. Yeah, maybe I do more, but I think that's actually probably pretty good the way it is. All right, now what I want to do is take these control points. In fact, before I do that, let's take a quick look at the image we've got so far. There we go, a little before and after. Okay, so it's definitely affecting the sky in that way. But again, I want it just in the sky everywhere. So I go back to my control points and I select them. Very important, select the ones that you want to copy. So you see, I just shift click to select all of them on there. You can select individual ones, or you can go around and shift click on the actual control point in here, or you can do it on the list as well. So I've just selected, let's try that again, selected all of those. Then under this little drop-down menu, I'm going to choose copy control points. And then I'll go to cross-processing, and I will paste the control points. And now all those control points are pasted onto cross-processing, and now, as you can see, it has successfully blocked out that effect from the mountains. So now it is just up here in the sky. So now maybe I go back into the levels and curves and I push this even farther. Let's go back into red and let's see what happens if I maybe crank that up a little bit. Maybe do I want to pull this down a little. Again, it's all just experimentation. That makes it too blue. Oops, kind of blew that one out there, didn't I? Let's reset that a little bit. Maybe go into the blue channel, and it's just experimenting. What is it that I'm doing? Oh, the opacity's down on that. Let's bring that up a little bit. No, that doesn't work. It was better down lower. And again, it's just a case of playing around and trying to get what it is you're after. Pretty cool, right? So that's how you can really control the area that it goes on to with the control points, and then copy and paste those control points onto other filters. Let me take a quick look at the questions before I move on. Jerry's asking, where do the videos live? So after this publication, at some point in the near future, I don't know when, DxO will upload these to their YouTube channel. So that'll be the place to go, is to the DxO YouTube channel. Somebody talking about delay in audio versus video. I would say refresh your your what is this thing called? GoToWebinar. That's unfortunately totally out of my control. Someone asked, Jerry's asking, how do you activate mask views? So that was, again, just by clicking on, so we're looking at the control points here. You click on this little, it's a tiny little checkbox, but this little checkbox to the right of it, and that enables that mask. Now here's kind of the trick of working with these things. When you, let me just do this on another one so it's a little bit more clear. So ignore the effect this is going to add. I'm just doing this for the demonstration. I click to add a control point and I turn that on. Okay, so that is now adding a control point there. If I add another control point, it's now adding to that mask. But let's say that what I'm trying to do is make this control point not affect that control point. So I've got the opacity I can bring down to 0, right? So that's now countering it. But it's confusing now because what I'm looking at appears that it's going to apply this whole thing here and here. Incidentally, dragging this to 0 is the exact same thing as clicking on negative control point and clicking on that. Does the same thing. The thing is that I've got, let's delete that again. Let's add one more in there again. Oop, and enable both of these. With both of these masks applied, if you don't have them visible the right way, like in this case, this one is visible, and I drag this down, now I can see the total effect of the combined masks. You have to make sure that you are viewing the mask itself so that you are seeing what is and isn't being applied overall. It's easy to get confused by accidentally having one of these off, and then you're going, well, hold on a second, this is a negative one, but it looks like it's affecting the whole thing. Now you need to view them both combined. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but I promise you once you get used to it, it's a really, really cool way to work. Okay, so let's see, I've got that in there. I think this is looking pretty good. Yeah, let's call it a day. I dig it. I'm gonna hit okay, and this is gonna render out of here. Now, let's say at this point, well, once it's rendered out, that I decide that I really don't like the cropping of this picture. Now, here's a thing about cropping after the fact when you have added an effect to your image. If I crop this, let me just grab the cropping tool and let's see, no ratio. I'm just going to do a manual crop really wide like this, and I hit OK. We're going to see it redraw and re-render. We're actually going to see in the bottom left corner of the image the filter reapplying itself. And because we have those control points on there, you might think, oh no, those control points will have moved because the image is cropped, right? We've changed the shape of the canvas, and now those control points can no longer be in the same place. But as it draws, we see that it has. Well, how is that possible? Here's the thing. Because this is a smart object, if I now grab this layer and I move it, the whole image is still there, right? We are just cropping the window into that picture, if you will. So even though we have now cropped it after we've applied the effect is all still applied where it's supposed to be. And if I go back into Color Efex Pro, because again, this is a smart object, so this is a smart filter, the fact that it's a smart filter means I can go back in here and re-edit this at any time. So there we go. We're into this, back into the filter. All the effects that I just applied are here. So now let's do a little bit more to this. Let's try and pull a little bit of detail out of the forest in here. I'm going to add another filter, and under the all filters, I'm going to find Detail Extractor and add that in. Now, Detail Extractor is one that can really enhance texture in an image and can look really, really cool. In this case, look at what it's done to the foreground. It has just completely brought the trees up there, which is wild because there was nothing there a minute ago, and suddenly I can see the trees. If I turn that off and back on again, we can see that's really being applied on there. It's a bit much, right? Like I definitely don't want that. So, but I do want this detail. I do want the detail applied to it. If you look at zoom in close here, look at the trees in here. With the Detail Extractor applied, it's adding some nice texture. Look for that to redraw. There it goes. Some nice texture to that canvas in there. So let's zoom out of that again and grab a control point, and I'm just going to add it to the snow. And very quickly, one click, it has added that to that area, and it has hidden it away from the tree. Now, at this point, you might be tempted to just say, okay, it's done, right? It got rid of it where I didn't want it to, and we're good to go. But is it really applying it to where you want it to? And it's a really important question to ask when you're working with control points. Is it genuinely applying it where I want it to? And sometimes it's really obvious, but in cases like this, maybe not so much. And so if you switch on the mask once again, then it will see exactly where it's being applied. And now you see where it's being applied and realize, hold on, it's not actually applying it to the entire hilly forest in there. Because let's think about it. If you look at this, there are a lot of different values hiding inside of this forest. You've got the yellow trees, you've got the darker shadows in here, the whiter snow. So there's a lot of different values that are going on. So that mask is not going to be a simple single one-click mask. But once again, if we go back into here, and first of all, I can just drag this around and you can see what will be affected, which is really kind of a cool thing to do in there. And I can see exactly what will be affected. So here it's all the ground, snowy area behind the trees, but not the trees themselves. And maybe that's actually the right result. I don't know. Let's turn this off and see. And if I toggle that on and off, we go, well, it's not really. I mean, it's basically like brightening, adding a little contrast in here, but it's not really doing much. Okay. Well, let's now add another control point and let's make sure we do get those trees. So we're getting a combination of the trees and the snowy ground, but now we've started to add it back into the trees in the foreground. So let's just grab another negative control point, add that in, maybe make that a little bit bigger, move that around a little bit, and really make sure that we're only adding it to that area back there. And now that I've done that, we hide this out, and now that detail is adding that nice little kiss of detail, that nice little bit of texture that I wanted to have inside of those trees in there, and it looks great. If we do a quick before and after, there's where we started, and there's where we're ending, and it's a pretty dramatic difference. We've got that beautiful slight purple haze in the sky. We've got a beautiful golden glow across the mountains in there, a touch of purple on the hills here, which makes sense because we've got the purple in the sky, but not too much because we had way too much before. My foreground's still nicely darkened out, and of course, when I hit OK, we're gonna go back into Photoshop where I've cropped this out, and it's going to look great. And that is that for that image. I like it. Hey, you know, it's all about personal taste. I happen to like this image, and there we go. Let's see here. Catherine's saying, first time I'm aware of the negative control points, and I've been using Nik for several years. Awesome, glad to help that. Please confirm that I can put a negative control point on a sky when I'm using Detail Extractor and it won't affect the sky. That's exactly right. So the whole idea, again, behind a negative control point is that you are blocking the effect from happening to a specific area. So you can either have the effect applied nowhere and just click a single positive control point and it will add it just to that area. Or you can have it applied everywhere and click a negative control point and it adds it everywhere except for that area. And then you can do a combination of them. Definitely here, definitely not here, and everything else kind of falls where it may fall. And if you need more control points to add more yes here, no here, that's what it's all about. And again, you have that opacity slider. Each one you can go, negative control point is just zero opacity. So you can go anywhere from 0 to 100 to find that perfect balance between them. Super, super powerful. It really makes the control points infinitely more powerful than without them. Alrighty, so that's that photo. Let's move on to another picture. Let's see here. This one's next. I'll grab this one here. All right, once again, let's hit that auto button to start things off. Click auto. Okay, good. Pull the highlights down, lift the shadows up. You know, see a whole bunch going on here. It's a little on the dark side, maybe a little on the cold side, right? But it's funny working with snow because at first glance I look at this and I go, yeah, that's fine. It's a cold day. It just feels cold, right? But then if you look at it a little bit longer, you kind of start to go, it is a little bit on the blue side. I don't really like that. I want it to be warmer. So you can obviously go up here, and I'm in camera raw here. I can go up here and I can adjust the warmth slider, or in this case, I'll just grab the white balance tool and just kind of click on an area, and that redefines, and I go, okay, that's probably a bit more neutral. It's kind of dark though. It's kind of flat overall. So let's do this. I don't want to blow out my sky. I don't want to blow out my snow, but I do want to make it all a little bit brighter. So I'm going to turn on, first of all, my clipping indicators. Let's just make sure. And so there we can see we're starting to clip. I can go pretty bright on there. Of course, again, I don't want to totally lose all the texture in the sky. So let's bring the exposure up, kind of maybe bring highlights down. That's looking pretty good. In fact, let's just do I was going to reset and start over, but we'll just leave it the way it is. Maybe pull the shadows. Yep, pull the shadows up a little bit. We're getting there. So now you might ask, why am I bothering to do this here when I can do a lot of this work in the Nik tools? The idea is that you want to send as clean of a file as possible to your plugin. And because the plugin is not a raw decoder, you're working on the 8 or 16-bit TIFF file that you've sent it. It is best to get your image as clean, and by clean, I mean have all your shadow detail, all your highlight detail that you want to play with visible before you get in there. Even if your expectation is to crush your shadows, for example, having that texture, having those shadow detail there before you send it into Nik can give you a bit more flexibility when you're there, because crushing the shadows doesn't necessarily mean making it solid black, right? That may not be what you want to do. You may want it really dark and contrasty, but you still want a little bit of texture in there. And if you end up crushing your blacks here, by the time you get into the plugin, you're going to be trying to recover those instead of just pushing the ones that you have down. The result's never going to be as good. So I tend to try and send as clean, almost as flat of an image as possible over to the plugins so that I have maximum flexibility in there. The advantage, of course, of working with the raw files again and the smart object is that you can go back and change your mind at any time. So if you do something in the Nik plugin and it is affecting it in a way that you don't want it to, and you go, oh, I need more highlight detail in the original source, then you can go back into the original source and fix that. So let's see here. In this case, I'm going to pull a little bit more of my cloud detail back in, and I think we're going to call it a day there. All right, hold down the shift key so this opens as an object, not as a picture on its own. And let's go back into, not as pixels on its own, I should say. Let's go back into Color Efex Pro. Any other questions? Nothing else has come up yet? Okay, again, feel free to ask your questions at any time, folks. All right. Once again, I'm going to start with the presets just because it's a fun way to play. So I jump into presets. I'm going to go ahead and look at all of them. I'm going to go to all presets. And I just like clicking on them, see what comes up, see what looks good. Like, I don't know, I mean, that's actually kind of cool in there. It's neat. Okay, all right, let's see what else. Blue Monday, that's kind of a weird yellow snow thing. Let's not go there. Clarity bump, I don't know, black and white contrast. How's that going to look? No, definitely not for this scene. Even on a cloudy day, okay, that's interesting. It's all about just playing with these different ones and finding stuff that you like. So here's an interesting one. I pulled this one up and it's called Glowing Fade. And I go, ooh, I actually kind of like, if you forget about the color, color's horrible. I don't like the, well, maybe some of the yellow's okay, but I don't like the big, huge yellow wash on it. But I do like this, look at this kind of dreamy, misty, almost like there was a little bit of, you know, when the wind blows across the snow and you get snow swirls and it makes it a little bit harder to see. It kind of looks like that, and I kind of like that. I think that's really neat. So I want to figure out where that effect is coming from. So we're going to do the same thing that we just did with the previous preset. I'm going to break this filter down, this preset down, and figure out what is giving me the effect that I like in there. So I like the glow in there. There's a thing called Glamour Glow. Maybe it's coming from that. There's a thing called Film Effects Faded. Maybe it's coming from that. There's a thing called Image Borders. Sure, it's coming from that. So I'm just going to turn that off. Let's turn off the Film Effects Faded. Okay, well, that was a big contributor to that. Turn off Glamour Glow. Well, that's part of it too. Okay, so now we know we need both of them. What's inside of these? Go into Film Effects Faded. Brightness, contrast, saturation, haze, vignetting, grain, film strength, film type. Wow, there's a lot of stuff going on in here. Okay, so part of the process of breaking these down to understand what's in a filter is going into the filter itself and breaking that itself down. And in this case, we just saw there's a bunch of different sliders in here. Okay, good. Well, let's just start resetting them individually to see what effect that has. And I find resetting it is just an easy way to see exactly what it does and also gives me an idea of whether I actually need it or not. What I'm ultimately going to try to do here, what I'm trying to achieve is to achieve the effect that I want, which is that slightly misty, slightly soft look to the snow and that wind-blown look. But I want to do it in as minimal number of sliders as possible so that if I decide that I want to change something, I'm not trying to figure out which of these 15 sliders makes the change, right? If it's really just one or two sliders that are making the change, then get rid of everything else. So let's reset the brightness and get a little bit brighter. Great, okay, because it was a little bit down, and that's fine. Actually, I kind of like that, so we're gonna leave it like that. Contrast, double click on that, it zeroes that out, and that's done almost nothing. Okay, saturation, it's at 36%. Double click that, and interestingly, it does not revert to 0. It stays at 28%. 28 is its default position. Default is not always 0 on these, and that might be to counteract some of the default effects of the filter, or it might just be that that's for some reason the engineers decided to make it that. There's really no way to know. But I'm going to take this down to 0 because I don't want any added saturation. Haze, all right, haze, double click that. Its default is at 50, but let's take it all the way down, and aha. So we're definitely getting some of that look from the haze. Okay, good to know, good to know. So let's bring that back up because I know that's something that I want. Vignetting, Well, there's positive and negative vignetting in there. Let's just go ahead and set that to 0 because I don't want any vignetting. Grain, I'm going to get rid of the grain. I don't want any grain. Now, if you haven't seen the grain slider before, you might be thinking, oh, hold on a second, you just dragged it all the way up to get rid of the grain. Say what? So notice what it says here. It's grain per pixel. You'll find this verbiage consistent throughout all the Nik plugins. Grain per pixel, think of it from an actual practical sense, an analog sense. It is little grain modules, grains of grain. How many of them are in each individual pixel? And at the highest setting of 500, you are effectively saying invisible grain. There is no grain. As I lower this down, you get more and more visible grain. I'll take it all the way down. You get more visible grain because there's fewer pieces of grain. Therefore, they are larger per pixel. Does that make sense? So basically, when you take it down to 1, it's effectively saying that every pixel is a grain of grain. Let's just take it back up to 500 because I don't want it to affect anything. Then there's film strength. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so there's film types in here. All right, those have different looks to them. All right, good. And then there's film strength. So let's just take the film strength all the way down to 0. And let's see here. Let's take that haze. I'm going to take the haze back down to 0 for a moment as well. And shadows and highlights are being lifted a little bit, so let's take those down to 0. And the reason I did all this was to show that now that I've turned everything to 0, we look at the sky, it's still kind of weird looking, and I turn off the filter, and I realize, well, wait, everything's to 0, but it's still affecting it. This is a really important thing to understand. Some filters, not all, but some filters, even with everything reset to their basic default or 0 setting, is still applying an effect. So some filters on their own have an inherent effect, even without adjusting any sliders. So that's super important to understand. If you want to get rid of that, you can go down to the opacity and you could take that all the way down. And now I truly have removed the entire effect, but it's just a really important point. I went through this whole exercise to drive the point home that some filters have inherent effects even without any of their sliders applied. So now that we know that, I'm going to go ahead and set that haze back up to 50 because it's where I wanted it. It's this effect that it's applying is fine over here, but clearly not in the sky. It is clearly doing something awful to the sky in there. So once again, how are we going to fix it? Control points. All right, let's just start adding control points. In fact, what I'll do is instead of adding positive ones down here, I'll add negative ones to the sky, which is what one of our viewers just asked about. So I'll click to add one to the sky there, make that a little bit bigger. It's not quite getting rid of everything, so let's just take a look at what it's doing. Okay, not quite getting rid of everything, so let's just do this. We'll drag this one over to the corner, make that option drag that to make one over there, option drag to drag one over there. Let's add one to the clouds in there, make that a little bit smaller. And you can really, there's no limit. I mean, maybe there's a limit, but I've never run into a limit of how many of these you can add. And again, you don't have to go crazy with it, but it can be quite effective to add multiples of these to get the look that you want. And I'm just, again, option dragging these instead of creating new ones in there. So now we've got a pretty good on the foreground, less on the background there. Let's see what this looks like. Let's hide all of those. Hide all masks. Hello. Please hide all masks now. Excellent. Fabulous. It is not. That is weird. It's like my mouse is stuck. Delete that. There we go. That's better. That was weird. It's like my mouse is stuck there. Let's just do that one again. Okay. Now, there we go. Hide them all, and we can see the effect is largely not being applied to the clouds, largely is being applied to the image down there. And if I toggle that effect off, we'll see the whole thing. You can see it's barely affecting the sky, affecting the foreground quite dramatically. And there we go. So that is the effect that I wanted to do. Although maybe let's do one more thing. Let's try that Glamour Glow. Let's do this again. Let's copy all the control points. So let me take all of these control points here. Same thing we just learned in the previous picture. Copy those control points, go up here, paste those control points in, and really remove the Glamour Glow effect as well from the sky. And yeah, there we go. I like it. It's got that kind of windswept look. It's a little bit more interesting than it was before. And there we go. So we're going to call it a day. All right, hit OK. And let's jump into the questions, see if there's anything there. Nothing else? Excellent. Again, as always, you got any questions, drop them in at any time. Okay, that is applying. And the next photo we're going to do is extremely monochromatic. So this photo we look at and go, I can see taking this in two directions. I'm not even going to do anything in camera raw. Let's just open this guy up. I can see taking this in two directions. I could see going into a subtly colored direction, which I mean basically is what it is now, but really enhancing the contrast in there, really enhancing the texture, or going black and white. Either one could work. Let's give it a try. So we're going to take that smart layer, go into Color Efex Pro, or smart object, I should say, and starting with the presets, always a grand idea. I love how we can just really see how that preset's going to look quite large over here before we even do anything. Right away, I can see that Bleach Portrait is kind of cool looking. It's got this real gritty look to it, which is kind of neat. And I keep scrolling through here and see if there's any that I like more, but honestly, well, actually, that's kind of cool. Lavender. That's neat. Totally different look there. We've got some of that color, but I like that Bleach Portrait. So let's go back to that one. And let's add some more texture. So let's see, we got bleach bypass, Glamour Glow going on, and a vignette happening. Okay, well, let's add some texture. I know there's texture in here, texture filter. So I'm going to click on Add Filter, add an empty filter, go into All in here, and I'm looking for Detail Extractor. Now this Detail Extractor, I'm going to move earlier in the stack. I want this to happen before all the color effects, because the Detail Extractor can create artifacts if you go too strong on it, and I want to have that happen earlier in the stack. So, so if I need to mask any artifacts or need to dial it back, I know where that is. So let's see, let's just take the details and like crank it way up and see what we get out of this. There we go. Oh yeah, you can see that. There we go. See it popping in there. It's taking a moment to draw. Look at all that. That's kind of cool, right? Let's zoom into 100%. Really seeing like every little speck of snow in there. Check it out as it draws the full resolution. Every little speck of snow in there. It looks really cool. These sharp, jagged. This was a cold place to shoot, let me tell you. Can you believe when I shot this, I was out with somebody who was snowboarding and I was shooting them snowboarding? Whew, that was a cold day. Really, really kind of cool looking in there. Okay, so I dig it, right? That's looking pretty neat. Maybe, let's see, I wonder if there's any color we can pull out of it, because remember, it started with a little bit of color. Let's see if we can add a little color in there. Let's see here. Somewhere in here is a saturation. What am I looking for? This was actually not on my list, and now it's one of the things I will say about the tools here is that the filter that you're looking for is not always the most obviously named. Brilliance and warmth, that's what I'm looking for. It's not called saturation, so that's why it took me a second to find it. But under brilliance and warmth, you have saturation and warmth. So let's just take the saturation way up on there and see if we get anything cool out of that. It's added, it's like pulled a little bit of the green out there. It pulled some of the brown out of here. So even though we've like cranked the saturation way up, look at the nice colors that are coming through on the rocks in there. Looks kind of good, right? I like that. I like that. Okay, let's try black and white. Let's see what happens with black and white. Let's get rid of all this. Let's just start over. To start over, I'm just going to X out every one of these filters. Now I'm back to an empty filter. There's one up here called black and white conversion. Okay, easy enough. Just add that on. We got black and white conversion on here. And I can start to play with the filter settings in here. Now the first setting in this filter is filter color. And what this is doing is it is enhancing that particular color in the scene. This scene has very little color, so adjusting this is going to have very little effect. Strength of this is going to have little effect, kind of depends on where we drop the color, but that'll have a little bit of effect, not much, and then we can actually add a little bit of brightness in there, but it's not a whole lot that I can do. I could add, let's add some of that texture back in. Let's add a what's it called again? The detail extractor back in there, and move that before the black and white conversion and crank that way up. And so now we're getting some, well, that's a bit too much, isn't it? Let's dial that back down a little bit. In fact, this effect radius might help us out here. So the detail extractor, you have a fine, normal, and large effect radius. Look at, I'm gonna draw your attention to this shadow right here. So we've got a snowdrift, bit of a shadow in there. Watch the difference as I go from, we'll start with fine, and you see how the shadow is being affected in there. Normal, it's very flat in there, and large, and it's still quite flat and just a bit dark. So it just depends on what kind of details you're looking for, but the fine in here in this particular tool, this particular picture, is giving me some texture into the shadows that I would otherwise be flattening out. So I go, okay, that looks pretty good. Now, all right, we're doing black and white in Color Efex Pro, which, let's be honest, is not really the best tool for the job. So here's where I'm going to deviate ever so slightly from the plan today. I'm going to apply this, and then I'm going to do the same thing in Silver Efex Pro. Now I just did an entire course on Silver Efex Pro last week. I think I have another one coming up. So in fact, I know I do. So if you want to know more about Silver Efex Pro, we will be doing that. But let's just do a little comparison here. So I hit OK I'm back into Photoshop. There's my smart object, there's my smart filter. I'm going to duplicate this layer, Command J that, and then get rid of this smart filter, just delete that one. So now I'm back to the original image, but of course I have my filtered one underneath it. So now I can go in here and add a new filter. Let's go to Color Efex Pro, and I'm going to do a black and white version of this in here and compare the black and white from Silver Efex to the black and white in Color Efex. Now, once again in here, we have a ton of different presets to work with. I'm not going to explain how this whole tool works. I'm just going to click through and grab on a couple of different presets. There's some really cool kind of poppy ones and silvery looking ones, and some really kind of quite cool, nice presets in here. Or we can just start from scratch and go for a neutral black and white. So now it's just totally neutral black and white. I can choose a film type. Let's go to a film type. And I could choose a really grainy film, but if you think about it, like this is T-Max 3200, you would never be shooting 3200 ISO film under the full out in the snow. It's just way too bright. So this combination doesn't really match. So I'm going to go for a lower ISO film like Kodak T-Max 100, and that has a really nice look to it. And then I'll go up here into the structure, and I can take my structure up, which is, look at what's happening in here on the rocks. Let me do a before and after on that. Look at the rocks in there. It really pulls out that texture really nicely. But I may be over enhancing the texture in the snow. So I'm going to go separately for the highlights and pull that back a little bit so I don't get too much texture being pulled into the snow in there that ends up blowing it out. And we're going to call it a day. So I'm going to hit OK, and let's just take a quick look at a before, at a comparison between the two. Pardon me. So there's the one we got out of Color Efex Pro, and there's the one out of Silver Efex Pro. Now, I'm not going to say that you couldn't do this at all in Color Efex Pro, but if you're doing black and whites, even though there is a black and white tool in Color Efex, you really want to be in Silver Efex. And let's face it, you're buying the whole suite anyway, so you may as well jump into the right tool. But I just wanted to show you that you do have black and white in Color Efex Pro if you want to use it. You can, of course, combine it with Color Efex, which is not something you can do in Silver Efex. So anyway, so there we go. All right, so there's that one. All right, let's move on to another one. Let's move on to, yes, this photo. This one you'll notice is an HEIC. Who knows what that is? HEIC is the high efficiency image codec. This is out of an iPhone, and so therefore it is definitely not RAW. And we're going to see a significant problem with this photo almost right away. Very quickly, Millie Johnson says, why do you have to put the detail extractor before the black and white conversion? You don't. I just chose to do that so that my actually, it probably really didn't matter in that one. I tend to do my black and white last. And again, I tend to not do black and white in Color Efex Pro, if I'm being perfectly honest. I just feel like logically the black and white should be the end of the stack. Although, to be fair, it probably really wouldn't have mattered in that one. Thank you for asking that, Millie. Good question. Call me on what I said. Okay, we are looking at this HEIC photo. And let me go to 1:1 in here. And you'll notice, if you look closely, this is not pretty. Look at the blocking that's happening in here, which is, you know, it's what smartphones do, right? The sensor's that big. And even though it's funny because, you know, our smartphones, they take amazing photos. They look brilliant on our smartphone screen, but you bring it into Photoshop, you look at it 100% and you go, oh, it really is not that good, is it? And, you know, it's fine for looking out on screen, but I'm looking out on here going, that's not good enough. I want to clean this up a little bit. So my objective with this photo isn't going to be to apply some look or apply some color thing, but there's going to be to try and hide the weird artifacts. I can't even call them JPEG artifacts because it's not a JPEG, it's an HEIC file, but it still has these weird artifacts in there that I don't like. So I want to get rid of that, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do. This is not a smart object, right? This is not a raw file, so it does not come in as a smart object. So that means if I open the filter and apply something and hit OK, that is a permanent render onto this layer. Or I can right click on the object and say, convert it to a smart object. And now I will be applying a smart filter. Now it's not like it has made this picture suddenly a raw file, of course, but it does mean that I can go back and re-edit my filter at any time. A smart object, if you're not familiar with it, is effectively a file within a file. So what that means on a practical sense is, remember I showed you the crop earlier? Let's just do that again. Let me crop this picture. And okay, so I've cropped that out. You see it says layer 0 here. If I grab the move tool, the whole image is there. If I double click on this thumbnail, it opens up to the file within the file. And now I've got this image, which let's just say I hit Command I, invert it. I hit save, and I close that, it goes back to this version, back to the original, which is the smart object within the smart object, the file within the smart object. So that's how the smart objects work. Now let's see if I can undo. I can undo. Excellent. So back to here. So now I've got this smart object, which primarily for my purposes now means that I can apply a smart filter. All right, filter, Nick Collection, Color Efex Pro. Now, the way that I'm going to disguise this is very similar to the way that I disguised noise in last week's session, where I went, this looks hideous, in last week's session, where the whole objective of one of last week's sessions was dealing with noise. How do you deal with it? Sometimes you remove it, sometimes you disguise it. I am basically following the disguise path from that course. If you happen to see that one, and if you didn't, well, that's perfectly fine. We're going to go through it right now. So let's get rid of the detail extractor, because that is the opposite of what I want. Let's zoom into 100% in here so we really see all that weird stuff in there. The first thing I'm going to add is grain, film grain. And I'm not trying to make the picture grainy, like that's way too much, but look at what's happened here. Okay, we've got too much grain, but all that weird artifacting, it's gone. Right? I have broken it up. I have eliminated it. I have disguised it underneath the grain. So this again is too much grain. I don't want that much grain, but if I take the grain all the way up to 500, again, remember, the bigger the number, the smaller the grain is, to the point where it's invisible, and now start dialing it down, I will find a position where I feel like it is just the threshold past where that grain breaks up the noise, the artifacting, let's call it. And I could start probably right around there, 440, 450 or so. But if I look down around the clouds down here in the mountains, it's still showing up a bit there. So I'm going to go a little bit stronger on it, a little bit stronger, maybe around 400 in there. And there we go. Now that is looking so much better. Right, a little before and after on there. Let's do a split screen. Look at the split screen on there. The artifacting is showing up here versus the grain in there. And that subtle grain is a much more pleasing texture to look at. No, we're not somehow magically restoring the image back to its sharpness as if it didn't have any of that weird compression happening, but we are disguising it and we're replacing it with something that's much more visually pleasing to look at. And when you print it, if you were to print it, this would look much, much nicer. Now I could further try to disguise this by adding a glow on top of it. Let's try adding a Glamour Glow on top of this, even though this has nothing to do with Glamour. We're going to add a Glamour Glow on top of this and see if we can soften up some of the grain without losing any of the detail, because that's kind of what the glow does. So I can take that glow up a little bit. I could warm it. Let me zoom out of this. I could add some warmth to it, but that's not really what I want. So I'm actually going to take the warmth and set it to 0 because I don't want any color cast being applied here. There's a saturation slider because the Glamour Glow has a tendency to desaturate, so we can or change the saturation, I should say, so we can compensate for that here if we need to. Its default is actually -29, and we can, play with the glow a little bit on there. Now it has also had the effect of darkening the background in here, right? If I toggle that off, this was a bit more visible, but it's still not really visible. Like I could do with a little bit more lightness back there. Now there's a limit to what I can do because it did start as effectively a JPEG, but I can try, right? Let's try it. So let's add a filter. Let's go over here to levels and curves, probably under L, HIJKL, there we go, levels and curves. And don't worry about the sky and the snow in the foreground, just pay attention to the mountain range in the back. And if I bring up my levels and the shadows a little bit in there, I can definitely pull some detail out of that. Now, I can go too far, right? That's horrible. But I can't do much, but I can get a little bit out of it. And it's nice, right? And just adding a little bit in there, I think helps. It also is setting off the trees there a little better. Great. So let's go ahead and, of course, add a control point. I'm just going to add one here. Let's just kind of option drag a few of these over onto different parts of that scene in there. Again, if we want to, we can, and you should go in and take a look at what is being affected and what isn't. And at that point, I can say, let's protect a little bit more of the sky in there, and let's protect some of the snow down here. There we go. It's looking pretty good. Maybe one of these onto the trees. Yeah, let's do that a little bit more. Maybe add that. Let's option drag another one over there. Not too shabby. All right, let's hide the masks and toggle that on and off. Yeah, nice. So now, let me hit OK on that. Now we've just taken this really compressed looking iPhone photo and added some texture and enhanced some values and made it look quite a bit better. And I think now we could actually get away with printing this and it wouldn't look too awful. So there you go. So this is something you can do with those kind of photos. That is 4 o'clock. That is our time. Wow, that went quick. I had one more picture I wanted to do. Let me see what's going on in the questions. And if anybody wants to stick around, I will do one bonus picture because I really kind of liked what I was going to do with that one. Catherine says, can you use the black and white conversion but add a negative control point so that part of the image remains colored? Yes, you most certainly can. Excellent question. All right. If you have to go, I understand. Have a wonderful day. If you have to go and want to see the rest, remember that 24 hours from now, you will get a video, a link to the video for this whole recording. And if you want to stick around for a minute, you're going to get no complaints from me. I'm going to do one more picture because I kind of like this one. I thought this was kind of a cool final one to work with. All right. Now this picture, it's kind of a bonus because it's not really snow. It's kind of icy. It's definitely cold. It's a bit misty, but that's about where it is. So let's do a quick little auto on there. Bring some colors back into that and open that object. Now this one is going to show you even more so of why working with smart objects can be a really, really good idea. So this is, of course, a smart object. Go into the filters, into Color Efex Pro 4. And I know pretty much what I'm going to do in here. So I'm not going to play around with the presets. I'm just going to go straight into it. I want to make this image look colder and foggier. I want it to look like a really cold, misty, foggy day. All right, cool. Let's start with the fog filter. Voila. So fog filter, you got a couple different methods in here. You can see what these look like. Quite like the, I don't want to go too crazy. Actually, number 1 looks pretty good. You got an intensity on that fog. We don't want to go nuts on there. Let's pull it down a little bit about so. And it's kind of over the whole image. This would actually be a handy place to have a standard linear gradient, which I don't have, but I can add a negative control point down to the foreground here, make that pretty big, and that is going to do a reasonably good job of, let's reveal that, of masking out the fog in the foreground primarily, a little bit and less in the background. Okay, so that's a good start. Okay, we're good on that. I'm gonna add, I wanna make it cold as I said, so let's add another filter. I'm gonna go to brilliance and warmth because warmth is my color temperature, and let's make this colder. I'm gonna make it all really kind of cool and blue. Yeah, there we go. Nice and cool and blue, digging that. All right, good, good. I like that. So here's our before and after so far. Off to a good start. I wanna make the background even more foggy. Now, if I go and take this fog and make it even stronger, it's obviously gonna have the effect overall. So what I'll do is I'll add another fog filter. You can add multiples of the same filter. So let's take a second fog filter. I'm gonna move it behind that brilliance and warmth because I want that to be happening afterwards. I'm going to take that fog intensity up really, really high, and then I'm gonna add it only to the top area up here. So let's get that just to that top area up there. Now, of course, if we look at the mask, it is primarily up there, but it is affecting other parts of the image. So let's maybe protect a little bit from the little munchkin here. Let's protect him a little bit there. Actually, that works out pretty well. And maybe we protect him a little bit more, go into this one and minus on there. Now that's too much, right? He's like not affected at all, totally not good. So we play with the opacity on that. We find just a little bit less on him, like so. Cool, I dig it. I'm gonna go back to the brilliance and warmth and make it even cooler. I really like that almost blue, cold look to it. I like it. So let's look at it side by side, before and after. Right, this is kind of cool looking. This is definitely a really misty, foggy effect. In fact, I kind of want to take this even higher. Let's take that background, really crank it up. Yeah, there we go. Okay, digging that. Okay, so I like it. I like it. Now maybe I want to add a border to it. Borders can be fun. All right, let's add a filter. We'll add the borders in here. It's called image border. Where are we? Under I. There we go. Image border. Add that on there. And the image borders, they're not super flexible, but I'm going to show you a way to make them more flexible than they are. So first of all, you have a series of different borders in here. Just kind of run through and you find one that you kind of like. Number 8 on here is kind of cool. I think I'll stick with that. And you can change the size of that border. And you'll notice here, and this is a really important aspect of this, you'll notice here that the image itself is not shrinking. The border is growing, the image is not shrinking. So we are effectively covering up part of the outside of the border. And I used to think that that was not a flaw, but a poor design choice. I wanted to retain more of the image and have more of the border on there. But then I realized why it works this way, and you're about to see why. So let me pull this down to about there. And incidentally, there's other effects in here. You can spread, and that changes the border spread, and you can make that border a little cleaner, a little bit rougher. And there's a little variance button in here. It's like a random seed that just randomly pops in a new seed number to generate that border. And you can add control points in there as well. But here's what I want to do. I'm going to hit OK. Now, I like the border, but it's too strong. It's too much. I don't want to see the border quite this strong everywhere. So now remember, this is a smart object with a smart filter, which means not only can I go back in and change the look, I can change the filter, I can duplicate that. So now I've got a second copy of it, go back into the top copy of this and turn the border off. And then I have one version of the image with the border and one version without. And because the image didn't change size when I was changing the border size in there, that means that the images, the two versions of the image will still line up. If by changing the border size, I was actually growing or shrinking the image, then they would no longer line up. So that's why I say now I realize that it's actually better the way it is now. So now I've got two versions. I got one with the border and one without it. So let's go to the one without, and I want to blend them. I could try opacity, and maybe that'll do something in there. Or I could try blend mode. So I can go through these different blend modes in here, and some of these will do horrible things. But if I do lighten, I quite like how lighten works. With and without, it just basically makes it a very subtle, let's go to 100% on here, very subtle effect onto the border on there. So that's kind of good. And if I decide that I want like maybe a little bit of that back in, some of the black back into it, because the lighten effect has removed the black, I'll make another copy, duplicate that. And on this one, let's see here. Actually, let's not duplicate that one. Let me undo that. I'm going to duplicate the bottom one. Let's do that. Take the bottom one up to the top, and we're back to where we started. But now I'll take the opacity way down on that and just add a little bit, just a little bit of that back in. So here, let me take these two and group them. And so now here's the original and my affected version of it. And it's just more subtle. I like it. You can do it either way. Let's add even more. We'll take that top one, duplicate that again. So that's now the one without the border. Let's get rid of the effect. Where is that? Oh, I know. That effect is being applied to the group. Oops. The effect is being applied to the group. So let me get that out of the group now. There we go. Show that. Let's go back to this one and take the opacity down on that a little bit. So now we're just kind of blending that back. It's just so many different ways you can go about doing it, right? So many different ways. It's just fun and cool. So there we go. That's what I want to show. That was kind of the bonus one in there. Hopefully some of you, oh yeah, most of you stuck around for that. That's awesome. All right, very good. So let's see here. Any other questions before we bail out? Jill says video is jerky. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm looking forward to the email. They don't always come though. Listen, if you don't get the email, let me know on Twitter. I have no way of knowing it's supposed to go out, but it's the GoToWebinar system I have zero control over, but I can go in and tell it to send another email if it for some reason didn't, but hopefully it did. But let me know. And if Jill, if you did not get one of the other ones, again, hit me up on Twitter, PhotoJoseph. Let me know which one you did not get, and I'll just resend it to everybody. Brad Thompson, can DxO Photolab do smart objects? It cannot. I'm sorry to say. Millie says, excellent. Thank you. You're quite welcome. Raymond, great session. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of it. So again, if I missed, Jill doesn't do Twitter. Can you do Twitter this time? Can you do Facebook? If you'll find me, you can message me on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. I am very reachable. I'm PhotoJoseph everywhere. You can find me. I trust you can do it. And Kitty says, thanks. Well, you're welcome. Tony enjoyed the fog tutorial. Oh, good. Yeah, I really like that one too. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks a bunch for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Bye.